Okay, we can start the meeting just after 1. This is the ADP meeting for Thursday, March 15th at 2 o'clock. The first thing is to welcome everyone to the Squamish Nation Traditional Territory. And we have an agenda in front of us here. Need a mover for the agenda. If there's any changes to the... All looks good. Okay, Sarah moves. Seconded John. Minutes. First order of the business is development permit 471 at 1870 Dowwood Drive. Here to present for the district is Elaine.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, so the development permit at 1870 Dowwood Drive is located at the north end of Squamish where Tantalus Road meets Dowwood Drive. It's on the south side of Dowwood, adjacent to the new right-in, right-out access onto Highway 99. The parcel is zoned C1, neighborhood commercial. To the south is a CD zone with a 3-story mixed-use building. To the east is a duplex development. To the north and to the west is rural residential zoning. And in proximity to this parcel is also single-family zoning. So the proposed building is a mixed-use 4-story with 1 story of underground parking. Commercial space and additional covered parking is at grade. And there are 37 residential units proposed on the floors above, on floors 2 to 4. So a height variance is being sought of 5.1 meters to vary the height from 10.68 meters to 15.78. And the proposal is within the C1 zone's maximum FAR of 0.75. The district's corridor trail will travel in front of this parcel along Tantalus Road. So the proposed development is seen to largely conform to Development Permit Area 8 guidelines. This development permit area is established to regulate the form and character of commercial and industrial developments that are not included within other development permit areas. As this is a prominent parcel on the highway when you enter Squamish from the north, staff sees the character of the building as important. The building should create a sense of arrival to the community and reflect community identity. So today staff is seeking the recommendation regarding form and character of the proposed development, specifically including comments on the site plan, the architectural design, building materials and exterior finish, and the landscape plan. And if the chair could please summarize panel comments for the minutes, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
No problem.
And with that, we have Brigitte Loranger, the architect, and Tom Barrett, the landscape architect. Thanks.
Hi. The site is at the end of Tantalus up here. The new right-in, right-out is Dowwood Drive here off Highway 99. So, and the parcel is this one, immediately north of the galleries.
Oh, you sit down.
Yes. So immediately north of the galleries. It's a large parcel, almost 2 acres, with a long frontage along Tantalus and a long frontage along Dowwood Drive as well. That being said, the site has some constraints because we have this large sort of gray-green area here is a riparian area due to a culvert that comes from the golf course pond through across there and under Dowwood Drive. That's one of the constraints. The other constraints is the hydro right-of-way, which is sort of parallel to the back of this building. So although the parcel is very large, less than half of it is developable, which means that the footprint, we have a condensed footprint, and in trying to get close to the maximum FAR that is allowed for the site, that means we have a 4th story on this building. just to give you some context of buildings that are in the immediate neighborhood, this one is Garibaldi Way in Tantalus, the Executive Suite, the Alpen Loft, and the galleries immediately, which is the building immediately south of our location. And again, the galleries, sort of a 3-story plus loft building, tapering down to 2 stories at the end. The townhouses, duplexes that Elaine mentioned, which are across the street on Tantalus, and the access up to the continuation of Dowett Drive to the Rock Ridge subdivision, single-family subdivision. So within this context of the Squamish vernacular, we wanted to give the building a more contemporary twist to address the site. We have this long facade along Tantalus, so we're thinking of taking advantage of this, breaking up the massing to make the facade interesting. So on the ground floor, we have a strong stone plinth, which is the commercial level. It's about 3 to 4 feet above street sidewalk level. And we have canopies punctuating at all the entries. Lots of glazing for interaction with the street. This lower level is at that level because of flood control, so that's the minimum habitable level that is required. The third and second story are then set back from the strong plinth, and then we have balconies elements. We have on the third and fourth stories, we have some roof pop-ups above some of the living areas to modulate the facade and provide some interest and break up the roof line. The fourth story, very similar to the lofts on the galleries next door, is stepped back again, so it's barely visible from the street level. This is the view from the east, so south facing the side entry of the driveway that goes to the galleries. And this is the elevation along Dowett Drive with the entrance to the parking. As Elaine mentioned, we have two parking levels. So the residential parking is down from Dowett Drive and contained on this level, while the commercial parking is accessed off Tantalus from a ramp and to the back of the commercial level. Residential lobby entrance is here. One of the important aspects for our clients is the livability of the units. The units are a little larger than some of the new development that you've probably seen presented in Squamish. With decent sized rooms, master bedroom that would accommodate a king size bed. Lots of glazing at the curtain wall glazing at the living dining room areas often to provide lots of light and take advantage of the views. There's good views east, south, and west on the building. We have raised ceiling features on third and fourth level. We have large open spaces, outdoor spaces on all the units, whether it's on the second level where the units open onto private patios along the courtyard or along Tantalus Drive, generous to the third floor balconies, which are again generous to the fourth floor units, which, as you can see, are set back from the facades below and provide large patios, very often covered. Going back to this second level courtyard, this is a common amenity space for the building, and we have a covered barbecue tables and fire pit and some opportunities for green roof. Tom will talk more about that. There is a concern from the planning department about the visibility from the highway, especially of the back of this is the parkade of the commercial parkade. It's got large openings and some banding in the concrete. Visibility from the highway. The reality is that these are photos from the site. There's a berm along Highway 99. Highway 99 is located lower than this site. So when one, looking at the Galleria there, and the riparian vegetation under the hydro right-of-way and in the riparian area is significant enough that even in winter with no foliage, you do not see the lower floor of the Galleria. It's almost completely blocked by the vegetation. And the photos below are not that great, but it's the same along this frontage, backing onto the property. So you would see, from the highway, you would see the upper stories, the upper second, third, fourth level of the building, just like you see those levels of the gallery. And we think that we've made that interesting enough to look at. We also have some planting opportunities. So you'll see the building once you arrive on Dowd Drive and you come to this corner. And there's good planting opportunities there, and you're only going to get a peekaboo view of this back because the area to the right here is all vegetated and part of the riparian. Materials and colors. So I talked about the strong stone base, concrete lintels, having some nice wood elements at the canopies at the entry to keep that warmth at the sort of more pedestrian level. Lots of glazing. On the upper floor, we're proposing three material types. So the wood siding, which is mostly in the balconies area, again providing a more tactile textural environment for when you're on your balcony, with some gray, dark gray fiber cement panels, horizontal panels. Let me see. Similar to this. And then we have some white panels that are more of an accent panel feature. So wood beams and rafter exposed at the ground level and at those upper story balcony, third and fourth beams and rafters. Curtain wall opening at all the glazing, the large glazing area and the living areas, punctuated with more typical punched opening for the other windows. I think I'm going to leave Tom to talk about the landscape.
Well, it's just the servicing and grading plan. into it, but I guess what I can explain is that here there's a bit of a slope that comes up to the building. This is the light, the bollard that we're using. It has 4 different quarters where you can put the LED light to shine exactly on the pathways as you want without backwash or glare. Is what's next. Like I said, it's just a pretty small image, but in looking at the properties that Brigitte showed you earlier, they kind of, along that street, they're either behind a parking lot, behind the stone wall, which is the one right next door to it,
Yeah.
or they got these fences along it. So on this one, it's got this 3-meter wide trail, the boulevard in between, which allows the street trees. But there's still a good amount of space to have lawn and a variety of textured landscape along the street, which the intent is to welcome people to the building and kind of echo that plinth and the variety of the building going up. And I'll show you the type of planting in a moment. Up at the north end, that's where we can have larger trees, conifers and such that will accent or emphasize that area is planted up and will screen that lower level. Here. In the right of way, we can plant plants up to 3 meters. This is the riparian area, which at this time we're not addressing. That will be addressed in subsequent planting. This accessible ramp, we're able to stretch it out to 5%, making it easier to deal with without railings and such, and an easy sort of, well, there's a bit of a confluence of corridor, sidewalk, and entryway at the sort of main entrance there, or residential entrance. This doesn't show very well either, but in all these green shaded areas will be a green roof with an 8-inch soil or 6-inch soil product that actually comes in trays. So your package shows it a little better. And with that amount of trays, several advantages. One is protects the slab underneath of the membrane of the roof. And secondly, it allows a good height of perennial small shrub and grasses planting. And it'll be enough to provide screening to these decks here, so they have a sense of being able to go in and out and still have a sense of landscaping around their own units and have a sense of landscaping from what you see looking up. Now, this picture I'm showing, it has a mix of conifer and deciduous in front of the building, which is exactly the kind of screening that we want at that north corner. And this kind of planting, the variety of it, it's got some conifer in it, is the kind of planting that we'll put along the street. So it's a mix of grasses, bunny plants, and some evergreen shrubs that will be closer to the building. So it's kind of an intermixed style of planting with native planting and native-like planting, which will sort of emphasize that sense of variety as you walk along the street. You'll have this kind of sort of mid-size street trees, flowering trees along the building at certain points that don't block the commercial, but again, tend to emphasize the vertical elements of the building and give it variety. And I think that about wraps it up. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. We'll start with questions. We'll do the round and then we'll go to comments. I can start with my questions. I really like the courtyard there. That that would be a nice side, because you're bordering off that riparian area. That's really nice. 3 questions I had was, is there any energy or sustainable features as part of this building besides the green roof aspect in the courtyard? I imagine that's just in the courtyard and nowhere else. Do you have any other energy or sustainable features?
We are looking at step 3 of BC Building Code. That's Energuide, I forget. So we're looking at continuous exterior insulation on the residential part of the building. And that with the building envelope along with the windows and doors to get a good energy rating beyond what is basic.
So like 3-pane windows?
Most likely, especially along the west setback, the west side. That's firstly for energy and secondly for soundproofing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a bike wash facility?
We haven't thought about it, but the bike room is quite large.
Yeah, saw that.
Yeah.
And you get into the bike room through the...
The commercial arcade that
Okay.
has an entrance to the residential lobby as well. So from the residential lobby, you can access that commercial arcade, which has the bike room as well as the garbage room, because the garbage room is located on that level, so it can serve both the commercial and the residential. We thought that was better. Then we looked at some point of splitting the two, having 2 different garbage rooms. That doesn't make much sense from a pickup point of view, you know, so we put that together.
Yeah. And speaking of garbage, you got a garage door, it looks like, opening into the parkade.
Yes.
Does Carney's pick it up there, or they bring it out? It looks like it
They
might...
bring it out, so that when we talk to Carney's, they like to bring the bins out, and that's why it's located at that end, because it's as close as possible to the ramp.
The ramp, so someone will be tasked to bringing it out to that ramp loading there?
That's what they want.
Yeah, okay. And how does cars get in and out when that dumpster's kind of sitting there on the ramp?
I mean,
Just
that's
negotiate
a
around.
problem that you have
Yeah.
in most parkades.
Aren't there 2 loading bays there outside though, that you could
Yeah.
put a dumpster in?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, along that ramp, is there any, Tom might be able to speak to this, is there any planting potential? I see this retaining wall going up as the ramp's going up, and there's nothing on that side, is there? Is there a bit of room for planting or any screening of that ramp wall?
There's existing trees there on the.
No, there's a strip, a narrow strip.
Yeah.
There's a narrow strip of planting
And
along.
there's also.
There is.
I don't
No,
know-
I can get, sort of like this, we can,
Okay, okay. Okay, yeah, that's my questions. Shan, do you want to carry on?
Was there any consideration, like with using this green roof system that you are using on the patio levels, of actually doing a full green roof on the main roof of the building?
Well, it's a fairly large area on the second level, and we thought that you'd want to put it where people are going to enjoy it the most. And where, from the upper levels, you're looking down onto the courtyard as well.
Okay. Also, the grade change, like looking at the, on page 1, the Tantalus Road elevation, and it kind of curves around too. The slope, as it appears on here, doesn't necessitate that there's any sort of railing along the the front walkway that's attached to the building. But then beside it, it looks like there's actually like 4 steps that are there. And that would seem to me that it actually may necessitate that unless the landscaping was done.
Unlikely because we'll slope it down with the steps.
So it will
Yeah,
not
there's no
move.
drop.
Yeah, I feel like that would be a pretty significant change to the front look. And I know that with some of the other buildings on Tantalus, it provides a bit of a barrier, but not really in a good way to commercial space by those railings having to
No,
be there.
And we felt that as well, and we thought we have the room to grade it so that it's kind of graded at the same level as the stairs go up, so that you don't have this barrier, which we didn't like.
Okay, yeah, no, I think that's,
Yeah.
well, then I just wanted to see that that
No,
was
We
purposeful.
can vary the
or-
grade. It won't all just be like the stairs. It'll go in and out and around.
Okay.
Can I just disrupt here? Is there someone in here with a black Saab parked outside? It's got an animal inside? No one? Okay, sorry.
The white paneled areas that are on there, it was, could you speak to like the intent in terms of the design of that? Like, was it just to break up the other materials? Or, my concern is that with it being such a dramatic contrast to the other materials that are on there, especially as the cedar ages, that it looks, that this is something that will in fact look purposeful and not like an unresolved or unfinished part of the building.
It was to provide some sort of contrast. My sort of image here, which you might see better in your package, has some cedar, some gray, and some white, similar to this building that has some white, cedar, and then darker colors. And same thing here. We just wanted to have sort of an accent color without, to break up some of the siding.
Okay.
That was the intent.
Okay. And the main parking floor, too, not with the commercial space, is the one that's actually below grade. There was in the 2 corner areas, it had been brought up about the bike wash station, but we had noticed that both of the, which elevation would it be? I guess it would be at the south end of the parking garage. You've essentially got 4 parking spaces worth of square footage that cannot be used for that clearly because of the parking. But was there any consideration of how that could be utilized by the occupants, residential or commercial?
We haven't, part of the next level is we've also got additional parking on the residential level, and I want to give us some flexibilities to move columns and whatnot, so that structurally because it's going to be fairly complicated with all these in and outs of the building. So we know we might lose a couple stalls down there and might have to reconfigure the parking and shift the parking in the columns. So at this point in time, we haven't planned for those areas.
So you've included more parking spaces and is allowed to allow for having to lose some of the spaces.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also with the cedar in the materials where it is included, probably specifically on the second floor, on the first floor of the residential too, it's showing that the cedar is coming like right down to the roof level.
Yeah.
And that too, and that's, with the significant issues with backsplash.
Yes,
coming up
no,
on those.
it would have to be about a foot off the roof surface with some metal flashing on the top. That's what we typically would do.
Okay. That's all my questions.
Hi. So the first thing I wanted to check, the 2 loading bays, appear to be projecting over the BC right away, is that okay? Or?
I would assume so because the gallery is next door, has all their parking under the hydro right of way.
Oh, okay, so is it an overhead right away or what's?
It's a BC Hydro right away. They basically don't allow structures, buildings of any kind.
Right,
But parking, you see that often, and they allow planting to 3 meters.
okay.
So,
And the same thing, there's a bit of a roof projection over, so on the 4th floor.
Pardon me?
On the 4th floor,
Yes,
there seems to be a roof projection slightly over, and I think it's the
Southwest.
southwest, right? Okay. Anyway, just a
okay, I'll have to look at that.
yeah. And so the next thing, the garbage room was talked about, associated between commercial and residential, and have you looked at ensuring there's enough space for both?
This is, we're in discussions with Carney's
Right.
at the moment, and so we still need to present that space to them, and they can come back to us and say, it's too big, it's not big enough. That room has potential to get bigger. I want to hear from them how many bins of what they want or need. This was our first sort of go around as approximately how big the room would be.
Yeah, okay. And we talked about exterior rigid for the outside of the building. Is it also on the roof as well? Are you using exterior rigid for the roof or?
I'm not sure about the roof assembly.
Okay.
We'll talk about with the structural engineer as to what we would do there.
And on some of the residential units, they have fairly large windows. I just wanted to, because they're also going to be now on flange, is that right? So I just wanted to make sure they're within the size limits of now on flange. We have some, of these residential windows, they actually appear to be quite large.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's curtain wall.
Oh, it's curtain wall,
Oh, yeah.
that one. Oh, I see, okay, right.
And then the other windows, punched openings, will be either vinyl or fiberglass.
Oh, I
Looking
see.
at both right now.
Gotcha. And the one other thing, the units that are increased on the ends of the building and some of the fronts, what's the additional ceiling height that you have there?
It's another 2 feet, so it pops up 2 feet and then slopes up.
Right, so 2
Yeah.
feet at the low end and then.
Yeah,
works its way
and
up.
those are always over living dining areas.
Right.
So it's provide a sort of added height in those areas.
Okay. And there's quite a few wood features. Are you thinking glulam or is it?
Yeah, we're thinking glulam, and we purposely left the columns to be metal because originally our submission did not have any of those rafters, and the planning department felt that in order to be more Squamish vernacular, we needed that exposed wood.
Okay.
But our clients is very concerned about maintenance.
Right.
So I like to put the wood where it's protected under the roof. And then the columns, which get more battered with sun and rain,
Mhm.
then would be steel so that there's less maintenance involved.
Okay. All right.
There's wood columns at the ground floor level, but then you're not dealing with,
The same. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So they would be the same as well, like glulam, and I'm assuming
That's
they'll
correct,
be
yeah.
stained.
Mhm.
Probably stained glulams.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That was all my questions. Thanks.
Hello. The commercial area, it's not showing as any demising in there right now. Is it a single strata unit or is it a little further stratified? I don't remember.
Kathy, do you want to answer that one?
Hi.
Hi.
No,
And
come to the
they-
table, Kat.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Sit down.
Yeah, let's see what.
Hi, I'm Kathy Smiley, neighbor to W. Darlington. And so as far as the commercial goes, it's about 9,800 square feet. And at this point, we're not sure. We've had inquiries from a lawyer, a dentist, a gym, different kind of gym. We know we got lots of gyms here. And like a cafe type thing. So at this point, we're not really sure, but it's not intended to be one big unit, it's intended to be 4 or 5.
So that would be, it's not a single user or a single owner with separate demise spaces leased, it's more or less stratified owner, user.
Yes, we will stratify it, but if they don't sell, we will retain ownership and we will lease them out.
I see, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so the floor plan's all open right now. There's potential at each entry to do one sort of larger commercial unit or 2 smaller ones. So to offer some flexibility depending on the tenants or the purchasers that come forward.
Yeah. So that leads to my question, have you considered access ways into, for the rear of those commercial premises into the commercial parkade on that backside, or at least service entries?
I've been thinking about that, and we're going to have to reconfigure that to have an access there.
I mean, it looks to me as though there's places for it there.
Yes, there's a few units that are easily accessible. The ones behind the bike room would be the ones that we would need to provide access to.
Yeah, that would be much better for those commercial tenants. And the ceiling height, just to verify, it's 13 and a half or 12 and a half, 13 and a half feet in that commercial?
We've got 12-foot ceiling, and we've allowed a foot and a half of structure, so it's going to be roughly around 12 feet, might come down to 11 feet with mechanical.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's very good. Okay. Thank you.
Awesome.
Well, I guess that's over to me. Sorry for being late, by the way. Any anticipation of mechanical overrun or for the elevator? It's not shown on the plan, but
At the moment, we're planning, hoping for a hydraulic elevator that does not have the significant, it's not a full story above, so I have to look into that further.
okay. Back to the commercial garage. So there's openings to the riparian area. The garage is secure. Like at 2 a.m. or what? How does?
Well, that's commercial parking. I guess it would be easily secured at the entrance on the south side if that was wanted.
And lighting, I mean, obviously it'd be lit, like a parking garage would be lit, but then it's got these big holes open to the highway. So would that be lit 24/7 kind of thing, or I'm reading about that treatment?
Good question.
Okay. Tom, the buffers to the south, the highway, the west, the highway side, and then the south, and I'm not sure what properties immediately to the south, but the buffer to the south looks fairly narrow. What is that space beside the driveway?
That's about 2 feet or so, and I'm going to put in the grass is the tall, seems to
Okay.
carrot,
Yep.
So I gather there's existing trees along
There's
there.
existing conifers along that whole side that is on the adjacent property.
And they would likely stay in perpetuity?
Well, they're not on
Yeah.
on this property, so.
Okay, good. Tom, you mentioned larger plant material, but I'm looking at the plant list, and the biggest thing is kind of, long dogwood or a 1.5 meter conifer. Are you contemplating any bigger material?
Yeah,
on
I think the
get-go?
conifers up at the north and south end would, they're 2 to 3 meters, so 210.
Oh, are they? Okay,
Yeah.
so they're just bigger than what's on the plant list. Okay. And there are no building sections or model in the package? Or there's no building sections?
More modeling in the 3D
Yeah.
perspective.
Okay. And no building sections?
No, we don't have sections.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good, that's all I have, thanks.
Thanks for making past 5 minutes, great. I wanted to ask about the access to the commercial suites. at the base of the podium. Is this meant to be, like when you follow up the ramp, is it meant to be a sidewalk to all of the entrances into the commercial space?
That's correct.
And is the entire thing going to be sloped at 2%?
It's side slope.
Side slope, yeah,
Yeah.
cross slope? Because it's quite difficult.
No, I know, I
cross
do
slope
always
to-
want to have it, but
Yeah.
no, it won't be if it doesn't absolutely have to be. So
Um,
we can either do a cross or it'll be a drainage issue.
I mean, you still can have some slope, but
Yeah,
2%
no,
is
it will
exponential.
minimize that. I'm good with that.
And then just to reiterate, the height of the commercial parking would be 12-foot-ish?
Ish. Yes.
Okay. And it's currently, would there be a gate on there or not? It's not?
Currently, we haven't shown a gate, but as we mentioned, if the building owner and tenants feel necessary to have a gate there, it could easily be gated off.
Okay.
But during the day, that should be open.
Open, yeah, for,
Because it's should be public parking.
okay, those are my only questions at this point. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. First question, I was wondering, you had mentioned the riparian zone and that you may in the future consider modifications. Can you speak to that a bit?
Well, there will be in a sense that, I think there's some approval maneuvers that have to go through with this project based on the setback, but there is an environmental review or report that specifies exactly what has to be done there. So when I inquired about it, it's basically a secondary phase to this, but it will be, the planting is quite specific in the environmental overview of what the native species have to be, and what their spacing is, and what it'll be its function of what's growing and existing now, and what will do the most for their fish objectives.
Right, so it'll be essentially restorative planting.
It'll be
as you
restorative
said.
planting.
Would it have trails or in seeding or just planting?
This I don't know.
No, I
just-
answer that question. So another part of this development permit is the environmental side of it, because it's within 30 meters of the riparian feature. And so my understanding is that in that area, it's gonna be just planting.
Okay, great, thank you.
Right now, we're staying out of it.
Yeah, fair enough.
We're not altering it in any form. In other words, we can do the planting. But you see that arc there, which is that's the riparian edge that's loaded right now. And the planting that's there now is what's permissible under the easy hydro. But those plants that are in that area are also specified in the environmental species.
Can you remind me the street tree that you selected, the Cornus cusa, is that, does that occur down the rest of the streetscape, or is that?
No, I don't think so. I didn't really observe much of a street tree presence.
Okay.
So this is your Cornus Nuttallii, Eddie's Wonder,
Yeah.
which is used right across the street in the park. So the constriction there is only a 1.2 meter boulevard band between the sidewalk and the bike route. So we didn't want to put in over some trees that will cause problems to that infrastructure. So these will be planted with root barrier, and we'll get a good size, but they will not be giant street trees.
Can you speak to the roof deck? There's the area that has a lot of furnishings and such, and then a larger kind of open space around. What was the intention of that more courtyard
It's
space?
it's where you have people that are living in the different units and such. This is a place they can go to outside, to go to a barbecue, sit by an outdoor fire or whatever, and socialize. So it's meant to be, I guess you'd call it an amenity space. And it'll have a covered pergola.
Right, but I mean the space around that, you have a really large paved area as a U shape kind of hugging around that
Yeah.
space. What was the intent programming for that area?
Hang out.
Hang on.
Yeah, at the moment, I think that, you know, it will really depend on the users of the buildings. There is potential for
It's,
other things that can come down the road.
It's a good question because it's hard to predict what the future owners will do or want to do. But hypothetically, you could have a garden party there or a social function or a birthday party or something we'd be able to have there. And if we constrict it too much, all of a sudden, all you're able to do is have a couple of tables, a few people. This, I think it has some flexibility and enough planting around it to make it a fairly desirable place to be, especially with the sun coming in on that spot and the views.
Can you speak to the level 1 treatment is quite consistent around the building, particularly around the west side? Can you just speak to the design intent of that? So along Tantalus, it's quite a uniform facade. And then
Yes,
along
but
the
it
west
curves
is-
along, and it's got the canopies that come out of the building. Sorry. Yeah, so we have, there's canopies at each one of the set of stairs and entrances that is projecting from the facade. We have, you know, a series of sidewalks and stairs going up to each one of the entries. We made a point of having a big feature at the northeast corner, right on the corner of Tantalus and Dowd, because you'll see that prominently when you're taking the right off from the highway. You'll also see that prominently when you're coming down the hill from the residential subdivisions. That's sort of a focal point. The facade along Dowd Drive is not very long. You'll quickly come by it. Because the rear, so the west side, it is facing the riparian, and it's basically a no access zone, unlike some of the other buildings where there's access to there's no pedestrian or vehicular access there. So that is quite, you know, we wanted to, we provided the big openings in the parkade so that the parkade didn't feel like a parkade. It's a, you know, so it's more interesting. It also makes that facade more interesting. We've got banded concrete there. Yeah.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
I might have missed this earlier, but what was the height of the plants on the backside of the parkade? What would they get to?
3 meters under the BC, under the hydro right away.
Yeah.
Well, they are a red twig dogwood or a rosa nut canna, which will reach 2 meters and 3 meters. So they're large shrubs,
Okay.
basically.
Oh. Okay. And what was the ceiling heights in the residential units?
We have 9 feet
Okay.
at each level. Plus the third and fourth level have the pop-up.
The whole thing. Okay. And the planning is in support of the variance, the height variance?
Yeah.
If I can maybe answer part of that question. We think that there's still room for improvement on the form and character, and I think because it's asking for a significant variance, we're looking for this to be high standard of design, and also maybe Elaine can speak about tenure options for housing.
Yeah, so basically, you know, it is a significant height variance, and so with, you know, with that, we do look for, you know, benefit to the community or sort of offsetting that a bit. So there has been discussion of affordable or rental units, and that discussion is ongoing. So that's sort of, yeah, how that is being seen by staff, is that it is a significant variance, but if there's a significant other benefit to the community, then that's how we're looking at it.
in essence, I think there's room here for height variance. You know, it's a 4-story building, it's not a very high building, and there's not immediate neighbors to this building. So I think there's room, it's just we need to reach an agreement on design and the potential for affordability.
And then in your notes, the QEP did 22 and a half, and you guys are reviewing that? Would you not go with that? Would you want to see something greater than the 22 and a half?
No, we are, and so this, I haven't actually connected with the applicant on this, but I was in touch with our environment department this morning, and so that has been reviewed, and it does look like that is going to be okay. So, yeah, that's all. Yeah.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Can you just explain to me what this chain detail is at the base of the supports for the canopies?
So it's a concrete pilaster that comes out of the wall.
Yep.
And then there's wood columns that are onto that. It's angled off the wall so that at the lower level, the clearance is still good along the sidewall. You know, we don't want that to be sort of.
Yeah, but there, it appears in the drawings that there's then from the concrete base of that there's some sort of chain detail. Is that
chain?
Well, that's what it looks like.
That might be the handrail.
That might be the handrail.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, for the stairs?
Yeah.
Yeah, by the stairs, I didn't know if it was like a, but it's just
Yes,
the way that
that's
it's
the handrail you see.
pixelated.
I have one more question too. With the courtyard area, there was an image that was shown up here that gave like a rendered sort of above perspective of the courtyard area that we don't have in here. Oh,
That's
that was
correct.
it,
Yeah,
right there.
yeah.
Okay, so with the green roof, the plantings that would be around the individual patio areas, what is the height that you foresee the plantings would become in those areas?
3 or 4 feet.
3 or 4 feet high, okay. And then, was there any consideration given about sort of security or privacy on those individual balconies? Because we've seen some other projects here that have had that sort of attachment onto a more public space. And mind you, it was public, not within the building, but that there was still like a railing, like there was still something there for people to have to be able to know that, you know, they could have things differentiating there as their space, so kids aren't running in and out of there or taking
So
things or-
you can see that each, the patio area that's right adjacent your unit, for instance, is bordered by a green roof, and then there's one access point where there might be just a gate, you know, that is more sort of symbolic, the saying, this is
Oh, so
my.
you consider that could
So
be-
my private space versus the common space.
No, there's no reason why not.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just want to
It's a
know if
good-
that
it's
was
good.
being considered, because that was one area
No,
that was like,
it's a
well,
good question.
idealistically, this looks like it would be perfect, but then the reality of, you know,
No, I-
Yeah,
it's
and-
all backing in that area. could-
Yeah, and you see that being done, especially in Vancouver, quite a lot. You know, a lot of the new sort of 4 to 6 stories buildings have that which are on top of commercial will have that sort of area, and those patio areas are fabulous, you know, and it's a huge asset to the unit. Yeah.
No, I completely understand that. It was more just like that, having that differentiation and the need
Yes.
for that or
Yeah.
not. And I understand that obviously adds a bit of a visual block, but it's not it's not needed to be, you know, to code height, because it's just more of a.
Exactly. It's more of a visual
Suggestion.
than
No, I
saying.
think that's a good idea. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I'm done, thank you.
Last comments? Going once, going twice, 3 times?
Questions?
Oh yeah, sorry, questions. Let's run on comments. Time's 3 o'clock, so yeah, I'll start with comments. First one would be to add a bike wash station somewhere in the garage there. It's protected out of the rain and wash it off and then go into the bike storage. Makes a lot of sense. Add a canopy, or continue the canopy in the front along Tantalus Road. I see that it bumps out at the doorways, but along that frontage, along the commercial spaces, carry that canopy across for rain protection. It'd be nice along there to have bump outs of patios or something. I could see coffee shops or something going in there, and the doorways are recessed in, but you put a bike stroller or bikes in there, there's no room there with pedestrian walking in and out. It'd be nice to have patios to activate those commercial areas, especially the one on the south side. It'd be nice to make that a little bit bigger. Could be a coffee shop or a restaurant or something on that south side. As well as there is no bike, if you're along the corridor trail and you want to stop in for a coffee, it'd be nice to have a place to lock your bike up or something along that sidewalk elevation there. I know you're going to eat into Tom's planting and things, but it would be nice in a couple of areas.
It's required.
Is it? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. I just didn't see it there.
We haven't shown it, but
Okay.
it's required.
Okay, perfect. And then and possibly plant up that wall of the ramp on that south side. It'll see sun, and then those people in that commercial area facing south, I could see this half-height wall along the parkade there. You're gonna see that. It'd be nice to be, instead of just a cap of concrete, it would be planted up, if possible. If there's enough width there, I don't know. And that's my comments. Thanks.
Okay, first of all, I like the form and character of it. I think this could be a very landmark type of feature as driving in, and I think that having it step back is being effective at reducing the height. There is also, because of the riparian area is such a setback, that this isn't situated right next to the highway. So I think a bunch of those factors that, I think the height variance is very acceptable, very understandable in this case for what you're trying to achieve. I also think it's really important that there's increasing numbers of commercial spaces in this area given the amount of growth that's projected for residential. So I think that's going to be very beneficial to that end of Tantalus to have those spaces available. I really, in terms of the building, love the use of the curtain wall in the residential spaces. I think that's exciting to see that kind of thing happening and really transforming how people are living inside the spaces as well as the look of it from the outside. And it makes the building appear lighter as well, so that's kind of two birds with one stone. About the parking, I think that the commercial parking, it's very nice to see it very open, but I do agree that that could be a security issue when there's basically no visual traffic happening in the evening there, that could become rife for it. So the idea that there's actually some sort of decorative security grating, but potentially something that's louvered that could actually serve two purposes, whereby it could it was slanted so that it would always allow natural light to come in, which essentially is the purpose of this. But then at night, when the lights are lit, it would actually help block light being seen at ground highway level from the interior too. So if something like that was looked at, I think it could help resolve two issues.
Shannon, can I just clarify? Do you mean a feature above those garage openings that face the highway?
Well, right now it has a low fencing sort of feature that's in there, but what I'm saying is that something that actually would not allow people to actually climb into there, especially if it looks to me like there is actually an intention that there's a gate that could shut off that area there. So there's not really a purpose in having a gate at one end if it's wide open for somebody to just hop in through there. But if it was a feature that could actually serve to help reduce the light pollution coming out of there at the same time, it kind of would kill two birds with one stone.
So more of like a feature that would cover that whole opening but be permeable? Okay.
In terms of the affordable, like addressing affordable housing, which I think is always admirable, and you guys in the planning department are trying to push for that too. I think there's something to be said about the additional heights, the larger footprints, the square footage and the layouts of these units. I feel like this is addressing an affordability problem, because these are the kind of units that might be people that always thought that they were going to buy a house, like they wanted to raise their family, they want to have their kids in a single family home, and then they go and they see a lot of the current offerings of what's available in a condo, and that's not palatable, but this could actually be the type of living that could fill a niche in between. So something to consider maybe in the planning department when you're looking at that too. And sorry, I'm just like, see what else I have here. The consideration of the materials, like the metal on the columns too, is great to see for those areas. I still have concern with the siding, just because the backsplash that can happen even with like a foot, it can get way higher than that when you get pummeling rain here, and you can see it on buildings that are even only a few years old around here. So I'm not sure how that can be resolved, but that would be something to keep in mind. And my comments about the outdoor communal spaces, just a consideration of how those can be managed so that everybody has a feeling of a little bit of their own space. And that's all that I have.
Yep. So firstly, I really like seeing the larger units, more livable unit sizes than what we've probably seen in the past. So I think that's great, along with appears to be roughly 2 car parks per residential unit, more or less. So I think it's finally good to see that in a project. My comments on the building in terms of concerns, one is just related to the close setback of the commercial access way on the south facade. The wall appears to be like a 1.5 metre high wall at the highest point, and it's 2 metres off the property boundary, so it's slightly less than 45 degrees. So I just want to maybe get a bit more resolution of how that's dealt with. And then in terms of the facade, I don't have any major concerns with the materials that have been used. I really like the use of the glue lamps and also the wood soffit. I think that the wood soffit's actually a key feature there, because you are exposing those from all faces. One thing I'd like to see possible improvement, you've got certain end walls that go up and continue up to support the slope roofs, and if they were to be pulled back down so that that roof could actually float rather than having this sort of awkward junction that doesn't seem to resolve on the other corner. That's a comment on that. What else have we got here? And my 2 other things, one was just an internal planning thing. It's minor, but just take a look at stair 2, because I think when it pops out on the first residential floor, maybe the door's just in the wrong spot. And finally, I would ask planning to maybe get a better handle on what the BC Hydro right-of-way means, because that'll obviously have some pretty severe impacts if the loading bay isn't able to go where it is. Okay.
Can I just add one thing? I also wanted to add that I think the landscaping, I like how it's very naturalistic in there, and I think because of that riparian area, I think it's very considered to the surrounding area, that it will hopefully sort of blend in even without this phase 2 that you're speaking of, that rather than it being a more formalized landscape and then just completely segregating it off from the surrounding areas.
John?
I just want to say I think this is a wonderful project. Like, right off the top, I think it's exactly what I would do. This is I love seeing higher ceiling heights in a project as well. I think livability, I totally agree with Shannon's comment about the affordability aspect. Because livability is not about fitting yourself into the smallest space. Save a few bucks on your purchase price. I don't think that really works, but that's a whole other discussion. But my comment here is that the commercial, and this is what I usually speak to, the commercial it's always been difficult along Tantalus Way. They'll need as much help as they can get, and that means the higher ceiling features, the great idea about the having aspects, perhaps the landscaping, to have little patios up there. That can always come after the fact, of course, depending on who the tenant is. But really, as far as usability, that those back entrances into the parkade for service access, or perhaps if it's multiple units, they'll need a little service hallway that connects into the access doors. Really would polish it off, but everything else has been thought out really well, and I think that's going to work really as well as can be for the location for the commercial there. And I think my other comments have already been answered, so I'm just going to pass them on.
Good. Yeah, I think it's actually a very interesting project. I think a really good mixed use, and I echo some of the comments you've heard about unit sizes before. I also like the fact that the garages are separated, the commercial from the residential. I think that's huge, and we saw the complexities of that in the last month's presentation. I do have concerns about the garage exposure to the highway, and we've mentioned that, and I think there's a treatment there for both security and light pollution, so maybe it's louvered grill work or something that would make that successful, or even, you know, maybe it looks like glazing, so it really looks like more commercial. I don't know, maybe that's a bit faux, but I think a treatment there is relevant. The overall building is a very complex form, and maybe a bit busy for my personal taste, but I think it is a really rich building as you move around it. It's not a simple modernist gesture. The ramps off of Tantalus, or the ramp off Tantalus, I think could be dealt in a more respectful way, where it shares the landing at the street. And maybe you have two ramps. You don't need two ramps, but it's, you know, if somebody's in a chair and they want to go to the unit at the far end, do they have to go to that one and then back? So I think ramps can be a very playful element, and especially since you've only got a 5 or less. If you drag it out, it's going to be less than 5, so you're going to be really in good place to make that a more interesting edge. And on that note, the commercial sidewalk is very narrow with its outsloping columns. But I think if it's going to be maybe a cafe or something, maybe that edge should be richer, and you can step out and have some animate the street a little bit with some patio space, or, you know, people put merchandise out, and suddenly that 6-foot walkway is obliterated and very difficult for navigation. Jumping around a little bit, the what seemed to be random colored or material changes on the building. I mean, I kind of like to see them respond to the form a bit better, but maybe that's just more of a whimsical treatment. So that white panel just seems a bit random. On the landscaping, Tom, I think the specified materials some of them could be larger. You know, this is a big building, and you've got 1.5 meter conifer going in. It's like, well, come back in 20 years.
That's about hemlock off the last part.
Yeah. And then I would like to see more significant screenings to the west and the south, and maybe just downplay that parking garage to the riparian area, and eventually that'll just kind of go away a little bit, knowing that you're in the hydro, but still 3 meters is significant enough to screen that. up on the roof, or on the amenity terrace level, I think that amenity structure could be quite whimsical. It's something to look down on. When I look at it in this image, it's like, oh, really? It just looks like a car parking garage or a car park. So it could be a bit of whimsy and a real
It
scope.
actually, you don't see it, but it's got a trellis.
Oh, okay.
It's got beams and then rafters the other way.
Yeah.
And it was originally an open trellis, and then the suggestion from the planning department was to cover it because it would be much more usable. So you don't really see it, but it's there.
But then there's 35 units looking down on something that could maybe be just a little more whimsical, I don't know, and still practical. And then that leads to the kind of layout of some of the live roof spaces. I appreciate the need to be flexible, but some of the shapes create inflexibility, and I'm just wondering, and maybe think about how that peripheral horseshoe would be animated, and maybe you rearrange some of what you've got to make it more flexible.
That could use some moves.
Yeah. And then it looks like everything on that roof level is live roof systems, but then you talked about 3 or 4 feet of, so is there a combination?
Perennials and grasses and such. I mean,
And
maybe
you-
we can put in some,
You might,
Nats Nursery kind of narrows their specifications down, but I think it could take like small azaleas and
well,
the
yeah,
ages.
because some of it looks like it's about privacy, the public patio from the private patio, and a live roof system, you know, it's that big, so it's needs maybe a little more investigation into the definition between semi-private
Well,
and
they
private.
specifically, I like this system because they have this 80-inch
Yep.
system with the white plastic between it.
Yeah.
And then with the plants, they do specify that you can put in, get a bit larger.
Yeah.
So that's why, I just didn't want to have 18-inch concrete walls.
Yeah. Okay. Well, think about just maybe there's some little bit of grill work or something that starts to be create that semi-private space separation. Looks like in the modeling that the guardrails start and stop. So where there aren't guardrails, I guess that's just green roof and then maintenance is hooked in or something like that. Right? There isn't going to be a continuous guardrail around this whole podium, right? Good.
Try not to.
Good. Lawn, I would like to see maybe a little less lawn. It's a bit of a suburban streetscape, or a lawn alternatives or something like that. But maybe if we play with patios coming forward, it'll animate that a little bit more. And then lastly on the variances, I mean a 5-meter variance for height is significant, but then I was like, well, why is the height as low as it is? And I don't know from planning, why is the height for that area only 10.5 meters? Is that?
I don't know, it's in the zoning, and it's been that way for quite a while.
So I would support an increase in height, a variance there, and the setbacks from the SPIA, well, it's a pretty benign piece of SPIA, so, yeah. Thank you.
Jocelyn, can I clarify one
Yeah.
item? You were talking about you said more significant planting to the west and the south. So was that sort of planted area adjacent to the right-of-way that you were talking about?
Yeah, the screening of the parking garage facing the highway.
Right.
And then the little strip to the neighbor.
Okay, yeah.
One should look after your own screening, so you can't just rely on the neighbor. Yeah.
Okay. So my comment's similar to Crossland. I think that the sidewalk along the base of the, whatever you're calling it, commercial area, be a little bit wider, and your supports for your canopies need to be cane detectable. So if somebody's walking with a cane, they're not like bonkers from the side.
I missed that, Sarah.
The supports for the canopies need to be cane detectable. And then also the access to the courtyard. The door that goes out needs to be a power activated door because there's not enough room to open it on the latch side of the door. And also, you might want to consider, I mean, maybe engineering is a different idea, but having a convex mirror somewhere to the south of the driveway so that you can see if somebody's coming out of the garage for the garbage receptacle and you're making that turn. And otherwise, I think that it's a great project. Yeah, and just to reduce the slope if you can on the cross slope on the upper sidewalk accessing commercial units. That's it.
Echoing a lot of comments that have been made already. In terms of level 1, I also agree with Cosland about the lawn. I think that there is an opportunity to increase the habitat value of the plantings on level 1, and I would encourage replacing that lawn with more plantings. Also, to me, the trees seem really sparse. I think there's opportunity to get more trees in there. I appreciate the selection of the tree based on the limitations of the width, but I think there can be more rather than such a wide spacing. And just activating the street, I think there could be potential consideration to having a couple benches or some boulder elements or something just to animate and make it more of a community amenity as you're walking down Tantalus. You can sit on the bench, jump in, grab your coffee, and hang out on the street a little bit. It would be helpful. In terms of the form and character, I find the level 1 really consistent, and I think it'd be really beneficial to find a way to break it up a bit. I really echo the comments of widening that sidewalk in front and making it a really usable space for everyone using those commercial units. And echoing the comments as well with the columns, really ensuring that people are able to meander their way through. Really the width of the sidewalk should be considered at the edge of the columns and pushing out and going from there. In terms of the amenity space on the roof, I find it a bit piecey. I really echo Sharon's comments. I think that there's an importance of ensuring that the residents feel like they're separate from the amenity space. I would encourage bumping those planters up to seat height planter, allowing enough soil to actually get some small trees in to really have them feel that they're separated from the amenity space. I echo Crosland's comments about the canopy. I think there's an opportunity to do something really playful and fun, and kind of echoing some of the angles of the building. And I would just give some consideration to the layout. I think I appreciate that there's an opportunity for more kind of formal seating and maybe some more flex space, but I find the U isn't necessarily maximizing the flex space. It's turning into little piece spaces. And I think it could be more functional if it's combined together into a bigger space. And then, I mean, it's just an opinion, but I think the live roof system in this application is just too small. The value of the live roof is really when it's in mass. And I think over time, with an 8-inch soil, they'll start to struggle by being so small. I think the plants would be better served raised up in a planter, and it would give opportunity for seeding. You could incorporate wood tops on the edge of the planters and just ensure a more long-term healthy plant life up there. But overall, I think it's a great project, and those are my comments. Thank you.
So yeah, I think the curtain wall is great, so you don't see that on these types of projects often. I feel like this is the galleries on another site, and I think the galleries was really unsuccessful on Tantalus. I understand that it's a very constrained site, so you're working against the right-of-way, this via, and it's an awkward shape. But, you know, to echo everybody else, I think if you could, I don't know, pull it back or introduce some plaza along Tantalus to create some spaces where people can can use them, it activates the street. We don't see that on any of those commercial spaces right now. I think the commercial space in the northwest perspective with that's sort of facing on a diagonal up Tantalus is really not reaching out and grabbing anybody. There's really nobody coming down that. There's like 6 houses up there. So I don't, and the access in and off of the highway on Dowett, I don't think that's a great use of space. Maybe you could pull that commercial unit back a bit and that could become a plaza area. There's no other buildings going around that would really block that from getting daylight, so I think that would be okay. I think the parkade in the back, it needs to be considered. Maybe it needs to be enclosed. I think the planning's talking about this being a gateway building coming from the north, and I feel like it's turning its back on that corner. If you could, I don't know, the northwest corner, if that could somehow happen on the other corner, would maybe address that concern a bit more. I don't mind the height variance. I think it's totally fine. It makes sense. I do feel like there's way too much variation and breakup and roof lines. It's sort of I can't really make sense of what's happening. I don't know where, there's no hierarchy, or I don't know even how to enter this building. If I lived there, there's no definition of the residential access. So I think maybe maybe if you can simplify the roof lines a little bit and express that arrival to the project, that might help a little bit. And the materials are pretty dark. They're all very in the same sort of gray tone, so maybe you could take a look at that. I think the wood in the soffit is great. Yeah, maybe just some lighter materials. That's all my comments.
Okay, any final comments? Are we missing anyone? Okay, yeah.
Can I ask for some clarification from Candace? So that one comment about that north, sort of that wood feature at the northeast corner, were you suggesting that happens more at the north?
The northwest.
Northwest.
Yeah, I think that's not really, there's nobody coming from there. There's just a few residential houses up that street. And
It's gonna get busy.
I feel like if it's a gateway project, that should maybe be on the other corner.
Like more features on that northwest corner?
The northeast corner. Or sorry, yes, the northwest corner. I'm getting confused with the northwest corner perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was comments, well, try to summarize them and people can help me out here. But we had comments on the parking area, we had comments on the commercial area, we had comments on the courtyard area. Those were, and some of the materials. So in the run through them, in the parking area was add a bike wash. Comments on adding security and louvered to the openings that are there, and possibly a door or something to create that security off the ramp.
And for light.
And for
light
light.
pollution at night.
Right, so a louvered would stop that. Anything else in the parking lot? Possibly service entrance off for those two commercial areas. The bike parking might have to be changed or something, servicing. The loading's off the back.
I just put convex mirror actually.
Convex mirror at the loading bay, kind of there, as you're leaving there. Yeah, okay. What else in the parking area did we catch? I guess that ramp there more treatment for screening or trees. Anything else? Did I miss anything in the parking area? We'll do it by area here. Okay, so commercial space, comment was to continue the canopy along there for protection of rain, and then activate that with possibly bigger openings or patio areas, sorry. What else we got?
Commercial loading.
Commercial loading, that's off the back, but that's in the parking area. Anything else in the commercial areas, frontage?
The overall discussion of the width of the sidewalk in general.
With,
In
right,
conjunction with the patios.
Yeah.
That's a different comment.
okay. And another ramp I heard, possibly add another ramp on the north end, okay, yeah. How about in the courtyard? We had several comments in there. Some liked the live wall and some wanted more. Do we need to clarify that?
I think if we put in like consideration of defining private spaces,
Yeah.
I don't know how specific we need to get about our suggestions.
Yeah, I don't think we should tell people how to design.
Yeah, but if we just say that that is a concern that some of us have about defining between the private and the
Yeah.
communal
Okay.
areas.
The comments that Jen made were about putting things into planters and not having it on the grounds that would change. That's not just the private. Public space.
Well, true, but then he was saying about those planters, or the system, actually the deeper one could actually have small shrubs in it too, which if that was doable may actually be an option too, depending on what they want to do.
I was just questioning it because it's usually a product used en masse. And so with 8 inches of soil, I don't know the long-term viability of such a narrow planting unit with 8 inches of soil. That's not a lot of soil and it tends to dry out. So that's my concern with that, and potential if it was raised planters, there's more soil, there's more retention of moisture and more long-term health. So it's just something for consideration and some research.
Tom, did you have
Let me
something?
provide some background in selecting that. It's a conscious decision to go away from this side of planter. And when we're on a roof like that, if we have concrete and we don't want to use wood, it means you start pinning into the slab, and that means a whole lot of other construction. And I'm getting more and more nervous about it because I'd say last year, half of our projects were repairing all those mistakes because the construction just doesn't work. And it has no flexibility. Once you put in these concrete walls or seats, you're stuck with it. And you've created probably a maintenance problem 20 years, 30 years down the line. I don't think the 8 inches of soil isn't going to wear out because the beauty is you can rip it out and refresh it at any point. So it's a very specific kind of lightweight soil that goes in it. Jenna makes a very good point on having that kind of flexibility. But I think in this instance, in similar buildings, like Neely Lodge and a bunch of others where there's so much green roof, my first reaction is, why are you putting all this green roofs on? You're just creating a problem down the road. And to the extent that insurance companies are trying to stay away from that. So if we have a system where your slab is completely sealed with protection board, continuous is the main. So in other words, across this whole table would be your good black stuff, more black stuff, and then a very heavy membrane, and then almost like 1/4-inch plywood protection board. It allows. What you don't want to do with that kind of a surface is make a wall on it. As soon as you put a concrete wall on it, then you don't have a continuous. You got the stuff trying to go up over the wall. It creates creates issues. So I think on a building like this would be the more safer way to go. Only because I heard the president shy away from the little green roofs and there'd be a very limited material and they're only this thick roof, which is what you get mostly because they want to not avoid that kind of wind. But in this instance, it to me is a good compromise. We can get that kind of height.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Especially based on some of the projects that we've seen recently coming through, is as a compromise rather than being concrete, because then of course you've got the width. You've got, you know, the minimum 6 and 8 inches on
Yeah.
either side that you're losing of soil and of usable space. But something like with the like planters that are actually made out of Corten steel, or it could be like a galvanized finish, or it could be a powder coated finish. Very contemporary. It could be literally unending heights, sizes, scales.
Yeah.
It could be enough to just raise it up as that, and then it would still sit. It would be a planter put in place that was still sitting on top of the undeterred roof surface.
Well, in a sense, that's what we're doing. It's an aluminum thing that's like this, comes under and holds it. And the beauty of it is the plastic tray that goes into it. So then we don't have the difficulty, like a Corten, you're gonna have some major construction, knitting it all together, and it's fairly heavy. I'm thinking out loud a bit here. Then you have to have a whole drainage system and a different kind of issues that go on that we won't have with this one. But I think what you're saying, they're all equal measure. I mean, I guess the Corten steel edge, and this one is that kind of aluminum system that comes under and holds itself like that cantilever.
I think we just kind of park this, and
Yeah.
our suggestion is to maybe relook at activating the space and planting it up and creating
That's a
some
good one.
sort of,
I just want to explain
yeah.
the rationale behind it.
So the comment is just to reconsider the private areas from the public areas and the plantings. And then there was talk on that gazebo area or the roof, people looking down at that, activate or make that interesting. And I think it is interesting, but we're not seeing that here, so consider the people looking down on that roof. What else have we got? Anything else in the courtyard that we?
Yeah, an automatic door.
Automatic door, okay.
Common access.
Regarding the facade and colors, I think most people liked the look, the colors. There was some comment on the white paneling that looks a bit different or not consistent with the rest of the building. Consider looking at that. There was a comment that it's too varied, there's too many roof lines, too many in and out. Do we want to clarify that? Some people said they like the look of it and the changing. It's a bit of a...
Yeah, I really support the articulation. I'd love to see more of it, especially downtown Squamish.
Okay.
It's a matter of opinion, I think, from person to person, perhaps.
Yeah.
But I can only say that we need all kinds of different buildings in Squamish.
Mhm.
So to kind of shoot one down because you have a personal preference against it, or for it even, for that matter.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, let's have variety, and I support this because it is something different from what we've seen in our last 3 or 4 meetings, so.
Tana's had a good point, though. The common lobby is the same weight as all the commercial units. And maybe that one needs a little punch to say, here's the front door for the residential component.
Yeah, that's a good comment.
Yeah.
To define it a little, make it more clear that it is
Yeah.
access to a residential area.
And then the level 1 was being a little bit too monotonous or something. I think that you can screen that a little bit more. We talked about plantings off, so you see from the highway, although we've seen photos that you provided that you don't see much, but you have 3-meter height that you could plant up.
Just the wing walls going up to the sloped roofs, whether or not removing them makes the roofs float more and help the articulation.
Okay. Okay. There we go. How's that?
What
Oh,
mixed
just
materials?
one sorry, one more comment just on the proximity of commercial access ramp to the southern property line and the treatment between the two.
Right. So is it, can it be planted or is it too close?
I think it will be planned. I think that's the
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
Just more clarification on.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd make a motion for B, support, and let them work it out with staff
Yeah.
for discussion. Anybody want to second that? Keep it moving?
Yeah. Okay.
Comment?
Thank you.
Discussion?
Who seconded it?
Dee. All right.
We
Thanks.
have to go around and make it. Do it all. Please support.
Oh.
Like vote.
Okay. Let's vote. We have a motion for B. Let's vote.
Favor?
All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Thanks very much, those are some really great comments.
Thank you for your comments and suggestions. Great.
Thank you.
I had a sense that's what we were doing. Okay, we can just recess for 5 minutes. Okay, we'll reconvene for ADP. Up on the menu is development permit 478 at Aspen Hawk, or at 1009 Aspen Road. Project called Aspen Haas. Jesse from the district is here to present from the district, and architect is Derek. Hi, Derek.
Hi.
And landscape architect again, Tom. Thanks, so carry on.
Good afternoon, Advisory Design Panel. My name is Jessie Fletcher, planner with the Community Planning Department. I'm here today to present an application for development permit at 1009 Aspen Road for an 8-unit townhouse. The property is located at the south end of the North Yards neighborhood and just north of the Seaside Business Park. To the north and west there are single-family dwellings, and to the east other townhouse developments. The property is being built to Passive House standards, and therefore Council has deemed this a priority project. So again, with a priority project, it only needs to be presented to ADP one time. Staff note that currently there is a non-compliance issue with the BC Building Code that the applicant is trying to resolve with the building and fire departments. The applicant has agreed that if that does result in significant form and character changes, they will return to Advisory Design Panel. The issue is with the height of the driveway, the clearance for fire trucks, so I don't know much more than that right now. As it is a passive house, they are seeking a variance to allow bulk projections into the setback. Currently, exterior wall systems are permitted to project up to 0.165 meters into setbacks, and they're seeking a variance to allow exterior wall systems to project up to 0.36 meters into the setback. The application is subject to development permit area number 7, multifamily residential. The development permit area 7 is established to regulate the form and character of multifamily developments in Swansea outside of downtown. The application somewhat conforms to the guidelines, and staff do note that there are some issues in that it is a passive house and the guidelines aren't really written with that in mind. So we're seeking ADP guidance very much on that, as well as with the site plan architectural design, building materials and exterior finish, and the landscape plan. And staff do note within the zoning bylaw, usable open space is defined as maximizing access to sunlight. Staff also note that passive houses are also designed to maximize access to sunlight, so again, are seeking ADP's comments as to the layout and design of the open space. And I will pass it over to the applicants.
My name is Jamie Hart. I'm just going to talk for a while before I pass over to Derek, who's the project architect. I'm the designer and the passive house consultant on the project. We'll just go straight into the site photos. So on the top you can see a view on site looking north, a 2-story row house development to the east. That's along the side here. And in the lower photo the same, you're looking the opposite direction, the same development on the east side there. Large line of mature trees across Aspen Road directly to the south, which has had some bearing on our passive house calculations. And then back to the location plan, there are several single-family homes that are in a circle around the north and the west of the project. That's another photo on site from the middle of the lot looking south into Aspen Road. This is looking at the start of Aspen Road as it leaves Queensway. So the two-story townhouse development existing to the east of the project is just here. And looking in the opposite direction, the townhouse development here, our site in this area. So I'm just going to go through some earlier design iterations very quickly. So this is an early concept design based on the site plan that was used for rezoning that we inherited, and it's taking a fairly conventional townhouse interpretation and applying it on site. The problems that we encountered is that the centre of the site is dominated by car movement. There's very little availability for common outdoor space. It does give the opportunity for some backyard space, but because there's a whole story of flood control level to be accommodated on the site, it means that your only outside space on the project is a level below your living space. And then the next design concept was to rotate these two blocks around 90 degrees. We still encountered similar problems with the center of the site being dominated by hard landscaping and car movement. The shadow or sun study that you'll see on the right shows its pretty significant shading of our own site and the site, the single family home to the north that's created by it. In order to maneuver the cars in and around the center of the site, we also have to build 4 complete stories to hit the required density that we were aiming for, which means that there's a compromise in privacy because these two blocks face each other directly. There's no, the angles are completely the same, they're parallel and facing onto each other. And then we move on to design concept C, which is close to the proposal that we'll show you. The center of the site is now available for common outdoor space because we've moved car access to the fringes of the site. So we can also then raise the courtyard that's in the center because the access to the units is at the edges, so the center of the site now no longer has to be at a level that facilitates car use. So we were able to move the courtyard level up to on the same level as the adjacent living space. And we're also able to increase the number of parking spaces that are within the building and have fewer surface parking spaces outside. And we also have a little bit more even distribution of sunlight for the buildings throughout the day as it moves from east to west in an hour. So moving forward to our actual proposal, what we have is a townhouse development, essentially a conventional row house, row of townhouses which is bent into a U shape, which is creating a courtyard in the center. So it creates a very definite public and private face of the building. And then the area beneath the courtyard we have given over to private garages and storage space for the units themselves. So you've got storage for, as well as in most cases, two car parking spaces, in others one. You've also got space for bikes, kayaks, snowmobiles, large outdoor equipment that's often difficult to store in conventional garage. By bridging over the front of the lot over the staircase that enters the courtyard, it allows us to provide enough density while also taking area from the roof to create courtyards, to create private roof terraces on the courtyard. So it kind of creates this stepped profile, reduces the visual mass of the building by making a little bit better use of the footprint of the site, and allows us to hit our height restrictions on site as well. So this is a diagram showing vehicle access on the left and then pedestrian access on the right. We grouped together the stairs that take you from your garage to the courtyard and your front door are shared between 2 units. So it allowed us to reduce the number of stairs on this lowest level floor plan and add an extra, I think, 3 or 4 interior parking spaces that would have otherwise been outside. So this is some page from the statistics page that you have in front of you showing that our height, building height is currently at 11.4 and 12.18 is the limit because of a relaxation to do with the flood control level on site. We have 356 square meters of usable outside space, which is just over 10% more than the bylaw requirement. And we also have the areas, required areas and proposed areas are shown here for the roof decks, so we're over in every case, usually 50% over, in some cases 100% over the required private outside space limits. As Jesse said, this is a passive house. I won't go into too much into the principles behind it. We can kind of cover that in questions afterwards. But it does mean that essentially the building should use about 10% of the energy of a conventional building that's built in 2018. We're expecting hydro bills of about $20 a month for a 1,400 square foot unit. And we are fairly well on track for all our targets on it. We're quite far into detailed design. So it involves triple pane windows, a large amount of insulation, a low blower door test to ensure good air tightness, and heat recovery on all the ventilation systems. The required variance that we have for projection is shown here. So the dark black line is our existing setback line. This is the same on all 4 sides of the building. So our structural areas are all inside of our existing setback line, and there's a cantilevering layer. In this case, it's a 9.5-inch TGI with dense pack insulation in it, which cantilevers outside. This line in the middle here is what's currently allowed by the bylaw, which is 165 millimeters or 6.5 inches, and we need about a foot because of the amount of insulation that we have there. And this is a site plan that's showing the number of interior parking spaces, shared open space to the north. We have the garbage and recycling totes are each noted, the locations noted in each garage, these grey squares. So the center of this plan, which is this area here, is being kept for rainwater storage from the roof. So all of the roofs in the building drain inside to the central courtyard, and this is where there'll be a storage tank, which will be for summer irrigation and also to run hose bibs from as well on the ground level. And we also have class 2 car charging ports for electric cars in each garage. So that's anticipating that in a couple of years that, you know, slow common chargers aren't going to be good enough quite soon for electric car owners. So this is kind of putting in fast chargers for everybody. I'll let you talk for a second, Tom, about the landscaping before we go any further. And let me know if you want to go on to the other.
Yeah, when Derek and Jamie contacted me, they said, "Oh, Tom, we've got this project that really needs landscape." And so I expected a project with a lot of grounds, and really when I got there, it was this.
Is it possible to use the pointer on the computer because the screen can see the, well, not like your pointer, but the mouse.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
It meant that this is all they gave me, sort of like a blank slate. Well, it was a courtyard that's surrounded, so I thought, okay, there's a lot going to have to be at play here to make this successful. You know, what's going to make a courtyard successful? The biggest thing is it has an outlook, has a sense of enclosure, and an outlook. So it has this open outlook out there, and then this sense of enclosure here. And then I wanted sun analysis that they provided, which meant there's more light coming in here, so light penetrates in here, which is good. It means planting shade-tolerant plants spread out and go out to there. So then within that clear, several things, 4 or 5 things had to be satisfied, I thought, for a livable area. One, the first one I thought of was people looking out of their kitchens, rooms, and what will they see? So I wanted to have these planting pockets that they see through, gives them a sense that they have a bit of a garden, or they're behind some garden, so that they look out and see seasonal flowers and such. The second one that struck me as important was right at the edge of the building was to be a step or 2 steps down. So rather than have that single face against the building with a feeling that you're stepping down most of the parking area or whatever, I think what other thing that makes courtyard successful is some sense of openings around. That helps a lot. So these are landings, and then 2 steps down. Landing, 2 steps down, landing, 2 steps down. And there you see a table and chairs. So there's enough room that they can have a patio. So now we have 2 things. You look out on a thing, you look out on a patio. Well, then the third thing was everybody had to get to the door. So that meant a path system. Actually, that came after, but what the next thing I wanted was mothers or people living there are going to have toddlers or kids or some place they can go to. So there's a patch of lawn, not only is the lawn, but there's a berm here, meter and a half high. There's planting on one side, a little rolling hill on the other that kids can go and be. The next thing I wanted to do was have a bit of an area, there's a picnic table or whatever, that residents could go out and sit on and watch the toddlers or the kids or do whatever. Then I had to connect them with the trail. To wind in through, how wide could that be? And so it goes to each one of those patios, and it goes around and through planting. Now in this case, the soil will be 12, 15 inches deep or whatever, so it will support planting. And then it has the flora drain product, Zinco flora drain that actually retains water underneath and has the planting pockets and again protects the slab. So sort of same issue. Getting to the less sort of then there's an entryway through here. So it's very heavy planting at this entryway. And some more lawn crossing. And then down here, there's a walkway down here, surrounded an area that has planting on it, and that's just like an open hydroseed kind of lawn flex space that the residents can again use. I imagine we'll have the stair was a more recent addition, but it has to be there again. Would have a small kid gate or something, and so would this have a kid gate that would be managed or could be managed. So I'd like to think that it offers, though it's a small space, it's an interesting space, it offers residents a sense of a sense of their own patio, a sense of a garden, a sense of shared space, a sense of play space that has more opportunity than several other projects. So like you just pointed out, townhouses that have the depressed kind of thing areas, the fenced in, dark areas. So I'm optimistic about the success of this. That's about it.
Just a couple of comments from me. So a few of the things that we found that with raising the courtyard in the middle is that it obviously has some practical implications in creating storage underneath it, and mechanical space and the water storage, which is all really good. But it also had some very other interesting effects, and that is that in the sense of the courtyard, you don't have a 4-story building next to you anymore. Suddenly you have a 3-story building to you and a 2-story. So 4 of the units are 2-story and 4 of them are 3-story. So the scale in the courtyard actually changed significantly. We understand that in the way that we created the U-shaped, we do lose some direct sunlight onto the courtyard. And this was done not without reason and not without a lot of thought. We also wanted to be very sensitive to the neighbors around us. And being a passive project, it's not just about the energy saving, it's also about the whole experience and how you approach this from a social point of view. And so realizing, looking at the other examples that we showed, is that the amount of shade that we now cast on the project behind us is actually significantly less. Now, the sunshades and studies that we showed you guys is in the winter, where most of this will be dark anyway. So our images are actually not quite correct in the fact that there will actually be a lot more shade in general than what we're showing. But the principle behind it is that our back setback, which is 9-point-something meters, is a little bit longer than what it typically is, just because of the pie-shaped lot. And because of that, we wanted to use that as our common space, which means that we wanted to get as much light there as we can. So that and the courtyard with it, we think we found a good balance between how much light we get into this and how it's being used and what it's being used for. So yeah, and then we think that we created something that has a very special balance between private, semi-private, and the places around it, and how people will interact with each other, and the fact that they are now kind of forced to do that in how they use the space. There's some material samples here that you guys can have a look at, and there's a big one here with me. I can maybe comment on this. This is steel, but it's zinc coated. It's got a few sharp corners, so if you want to see it or touch it, I can bring it to you. But the idea is with this, if we can get to that sample that shows so the idea with this is that the corner will actually be cut at an angle so that it creates a very clean connection, and creating a little bit more of a residential feel to it than the typical commercial where there's this big trim piece that they put on the end to hide the corner connection. So making it a little bit more elegant, and with the semi-industrial zoning across the street on Aspen Road, we think that this is a reasonable transition. It also has absolutely zero maintenance. So 100 years from now, this will still look exactly like it does today. So, yeah. And then the other materials are basically cedar and hardy plank. So we do have one in the little video that we created. We had a little bit of a back and forth with our code consultant. The two white blocks that you guys see at the top there, we were able to change those to have cedar siding. The same with that one in the back. Yeah, is cedar siding. The same as what we have, actually what we are showing on the inside. So we were able to move away from the hardy plank in the upper decks, so that people can have a natural material that they can touch, and not just the hardy plank. Those are also very easy areas where the maintenance can happen. Where on the big facades, having 3 stories, it's good to have materials that will not require any painting or anything like that.
I'll just go back a little bit and then move quickly. So we've got a floor plan for the lowest level. There's 8 units here, each with their own extra storage room through the back of their garage. And then you'll see the same 8 units, each around here. There are 3-bedroom units, there's 7 of them, and then there's a 4-bedroom unit, which is this large one in the northwest corner that's created by the shape of the lot. It gives it an extra space for a 4th bedroom there. We're aiming to heat the units just with the ventilation system, and potentially just some new heat in for electric heating in the front entryways. So they shouldn't require, there's no central heating system at all. We will probably avoid any baseboards as well, because the heating load is so low that that's kind of the balance that you get with passive house, that more money goes into the envelope and less money into mechanical systems. And then the upper levels, so on the top level, the 3-story townhouse units will walk out above the 2-story townhouse units. So Unit A will walk out here onto the roof of Unit B and face out into the courtyard. Unit B, their stair comes up from below and has an east-facing deck here. Similarly, Unit C will walk onto the roof of Unit D. Unit D has its own roof deck here, and that is mirrored around on the other side. So by compromising a little bit on the amount of floor area on the top level, we were able to give every unit quite a generous and private rooftop deck space. And then there's a sun study for 3 times in the year, or 4 times, at 3 different times in the day. Sections through the courtyard. So as Derek was saying, you know, your experience in the center is partially that you're alongside a 2-story building in some areas, and then the feeling of a 3-story building next to you elsewhere, whereas from the street it will appear as a 4-story building to its surroundings, 4 stories with occasional steps down on the roof profile. And this is elevation view. So the spaces that Derek's referring to, that we will likely use the same vertical cedar cladding that's on the material board here, are these recesses for the roof decks along here and here, and similarly on the other elevation here and here. And this is a collection of photo precedents of exterior cladding materials: corrugated zinc-coated steel, vertical cedar siding, and 2 tones of fiber cement with a recessed trim. This is a perspective from Aspen Road. We are looking at, one of the things with passive house design is that you have to really justify making extra corners and having extra features just for kind of a sense of variety in what would otherwise be a straight wall or a straight roof profile. You pay a penalty every time you create a thermal bridge. Cantilevering, sunshades and canopies all create thermal bridges, so there's a certain onus to keep things simple. We have looked at using another profile of the same metal cladding to differentiate the smaller units here, so that the material doesn't change along the wall, but there's just a subtle change in the profile to use a vertical seam cladding there. So it's a slight kind of concession to highlighting that it's a townhouse unit of parallel, a townhouse building of parallel units, and not an apartment building where, you know, the apartments are occupying a single floor. And this is a perspective, I think it's the final slide, perspective in the courtyard. So as Derek alluded to, there's cedar cladding on the walls, on the roof deck recesses on the top floor, and also wrapping around the ground level here, anywhere that it's easy to do maintenance without ladder or scaffolding, and places that are a little bit more sheltered from sunlight and rain. And that is it, unless you have any more comments.
Okay, thanks very much. Round of questions and comments. So, Tess, do you want to start with questions? Come back to you, sure. I can start then. I don't have many. I'm not going to ask about sustainability issues or what you did to do that. Appreciate where you went with the approach on building siding on the site, and that understanding there is very good. I like the project a lot. There's 2 comments would be, there was talk about, I see these areas on the top deck there. Is there any ability to overhang that anymore so that it's
We're at
in the rain?
So the roof on the outside of the building, as it looks to the outside, is at the maximum overhang allowed by the bylaw, which is 0.76 meters. It doesn't look like much because the insulation underneath it is projecting so much, so the revealed area of the soffit is smaller than it would be if we were building a standard construction where the insulation was much thinner.
What about were those recessed areas where you actually have a patio or something for barbecue? I mean,
it is possible. So we're running that through because the shading calculations in the passive house, you know, everything has a little consequence in it.
Yeah.
It would definitely be something that I've looked at in terms of being able to store barbecue and a little bit more storage there, things like that. It looks like we can, because we don't have a problem with too little solar gain on the project. We're getting plenty of sun for the units themselves. So I can see, in these areas where it's not against the setback line.
Exactly.
Kind of interior roof overhang parts.
Yeah. Okay.
So we also ended up with quite a bit significant storage space here on the upper floor for some of the units to allow for, like, if you have some chairs or a barbecue or something like that, that you can't put it away if you don't want to leave it outside for the whole winter.
Okay. On the front staircase, it would be lit. It looks like it's kind of a dark hallway going in. It'll be always dark. Do you have any lighting in there, or?
We do. So we have, it's not shown up in these drawings, but because the staircase is so wide relative to the amount of use that we require, we have these larger concrete steps, which are much larger than the walking steps that form the edges as you come up, that can be used for a little bit of uplighting just in underneath the canopy. And then I presume that we're going to have some ceiling lights.
Yeah. It's also very big. I don't think any of the angles that we show really give you the sense of it, but I think it's 6 or 8 feet wide. It's very big.
Yeah.
So there will be plenty of light, and obviously both sides are completely open. Yeah.
Any consideration on ramping it?
Yeah, that would be possible.
Okay. Yeah. Or even sometimes there's a strip for your bike tire to run up.
Yes.
I did think about that. It's done a lot. If you can go around Copenhagen, every stairs has a little metal track or formed of concrete.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that any adults will ever need to take their bike up or down because there's so much storage on the ground level. And people have hose bin for bike washing at their units down there. So we kind of proposed it and then thought about the value of it. But we do have the space to accommodate it. It won't take away any space for people moving up and down. It's a very wide staircase for not a very large development.
Okay.
Maybe take some tricycles out.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, great project here. Nice to put that hydro box in the back there.
Mm-hmm.
Usually you see it in the front of a building, and it's nice to tuck it in. But that's my question or comment. Questions? Yeah.
So I noticed that with the sole 4-bedroom unit, it is actually one of the few that only has a 1 parking stall. Was that ever
It's
broached?
got 2. One is in the garage,
But it has one that's outside that's designated for it.
So we meet all the parking requirements, other than the fact that one of our parking spaces, the accessible one, is in the front, which is a no-no, but
Okay.
we're sorry.
Okay. So do all the ones that only have one?
Yeah. So
they have an exterior.
So there are two spaces per unit, and then there are 2 visitor spaces. Not every unit has 2 spaces inside, but everybody has 2 spaces.
Okay. And then I was going to ask about the old cranes too, but you guys already addressed that. And then I noticed that the window trim on the exterior, that some of them that you have like the projected boxes, and some of them are more like a trimless feature there. Is there a passive house reason for that, or is that purely aesthetic, just to break it up?
There's a passive house reason for the presence of the large reveal on the big windows because of overheating risk in the summertime. And then I felt like it was getting a little bit excessive to have, small windows with large bump outs everywhere, that it created a really kind of a busy rhythm. We just wanted to highlight kind of living spaces and, almost provide little like windows into living spaces, and then have small bathroom windows just sort of recessed where they're quite subtle.
The shadow that reveal casts on every window is calculated and put into the software. So none of this, we can take it away somewhere, we will have to put it in somewhere. It's a balance of what we ended up with.
Oh, that's what I was curious about. It was very intentional, clearly it is. I think that's all my questions. Yeah.
Nate, got some questions about accessibility and how it relates to zoning requirements. I see there's like accessible access, and you might have mentioned there was an accessible car park as well, but the building won't be accessible. So what's the point?
The point is that the
Well,
Bible...
because you could have somebody who has an accessible parking perhaps,
Yeah.
and it's a hard issue.
Oh.
So there's still ambulatory, but they can't.
Gotcha. Great. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
And then the second thing is, I can't see any dimensions. I was wondering what's the width of unit F and C, like between party walls? So like not including stairs, but just like the living room or kitchen.
It's about 14 feet.
So that's the smaller of them.
Yeah.
And then say the bigger ones like G, do you have an idea of what those ones are?
Couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
But it's greater than
That's basically 3 feet for the staircase, 3 feet for the hallway next to it, and then you have about 8.5 feet for the bedroom clear on the inside.
Right. And then so there's a flood control level, and I see on the sections, the passive panel on the outside face is quite close to the FCL. Have you got a separation between the two?
Yes, 2.5 inches.
Okay. And there's no issues about the BC Hydro being at the back of the site in terms of access to it?
No, I think we might have to register right away along the west side driveway so that they always have access to it.
Right.
But it meets the clearance requirements in terms of not having parking or planting within the required dimensions.
Yeah.
So from that point of view.
Okay, because I imagine they need a fairly large vehicle to get through there.
Yeah.
The civil engineer said it's fine.
Yeah.
I quote. You won't know.
And so what's this, the main floor is concrete, is that correct? Where the landscaping is on top?
The lowest level.
Yeah. So then, and you've got drainage that goes down through into the...
Yeah, so the concrete, the roof of the green roof in the courtyard slopes to the centre.
Right.
And then it collects rainwater in there, which is then, the system's being designed at the moment, but it will be used for irrigation in the summer. So there are concrete walls below that level, and then everything from that slab upwards. That slab, the concrete slab, doesn't continue between the garages and the units above. It's just the green roof area. So we have a timber floor between the garage and the units above.
Okay, right. So yeah, garage is a wood frame, but the interior sort of triangle, if you want to call it that, is concrete.
So the ground floor is completely concrete walls.
Oh.
The triangle in centre also has a concrete roof, but then above the garages themselves at the edges, it's all timber frames. So it's a I-joist, timber I-joist floors all the way up from there, just for cost and for passive house construction.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, the garbage recycling, is it intended that they leave the bins out there all the time, or will they take them back into the garages?
They would take them back in.
So it's just a collection?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. They're all my questions.
Can I interject a quick question? Here, just about the rainwater collection. What happens if those reach capacity? What happens with the water then?
It goes into the storm drain. So what we do is, that's our on-site management, is that it will fill up this tank, and we can use this tank in the summer for all the landscaping and all those things. If there's too much in it, it goes over into the storm drain, which it would have done if there wasn't a tank. If there's not enough in it, then we'll fill it up with municipal water so that we can do our landscaping.
Okay.
Yeah. The civil engineer will tell us if we can fill it up.
I really have no questions except just want to confirm that there's no height variance here.
We have 6 inches that way.
Okay.
Oh, plenty of room.
0.75 meters.
Thanks.
I was going to ask what the difference in surface area of the road surface and pavement in A and C were. You might have done that, but you know what? You convinced me on C, so skip that.
Okay.
The wall section. Can you flip back to your passive wall section? So it looks like it's just your service wall that's on the inside of the building envelope, or on the building setback.
Yeah.
And it's the passive wall, which is actually a bearing wall, is on the outside.
It's not a bearing wall, so the I-joist, you see it misses the concrete.
Yeah.
And it's connected horizontally to the plywood, which is the air barrier, and it's our structural sheathing. So your structure is completely within. We could delete everything outside outside of our setback lines and the building would fall down.
So, okay, so it's a little different than they typically build, because that
Yeah.
inside wall is usually your
It's
service wall.
usually a 2x10 structural wall,
Yeah.
and then it would have to sit on concrete,
Yeah.
and then the 2x4 is put in afterwards, non-structural. This is a 2x6 structural wall on the inside, and then even after the first blower door test, the I-joists are attached and filled with insulation outside of that.
Interesting, okay, great.
It kind of works, it's a little bit easier to deal with in terms of keeping your structure inside setbacks, because the district has some policies in place to allow exterior insulation, so you don't have to let the wall grow in or go across the setback with a concrete wall.
Good. So the issues of slab protection that we discussed in the previous application don't apply here?
No, in the sense that
Or there's no penetration?
there's no,
by slab?
it's got that plastic.
Okay. The roof, because there's no detailed building section, how are you achieving the draining roof, and how is the roof treatment of the roof decks handled? And the height variance at doorways and all that threshold complication?
It's a little bit tricky detailing. We're already pretty far into it,
Yeah.
because we already have to put them through thermal bridge analysis things. So we just have the slope on the roof decks is formed with the plywood sheathing. So it kind of is put on strapping underneath, and then there's 2-ply torch-on membrane which slopes inside to the courtyard on the decks that face the inside, and then the smaller decks that face the outside, it goes to a small drip edge at the outside, because there's a very small roof area in each case that drains to the outside edge of the building.
So, okay. Yeah, because last time I did one, it was complicated trying to get the passive performance and stuff really the
Yeah.
How are you dealing with durability of both of your cementatious panels and specifically your cedar with almost no overhang and cedars, right, associated with the ground plane? I can imagine even just the cementatious panels getting really weathered and scum lines on them from dripping, and especially all the north side faces.
The north side is, the north elevation is where we're using the corrugated zinc panel, so that side is, we can pull up the video again. We will need to pay attention to how every cladding material meets the ground at the courtyard level. We also have, because it's passive house, the insulation goes right down below that floor joist there, so there's very careful detailing just to protect the structural timber frame of the building as well as the cladding there, so it is something that we need to keep working on.
We are planning on putting gutters to make sure that the water doesn't fall down and splash everywhere.
Yeah.
Although we can show that on the.
Oh, that'd be useful for capturing your rainwater. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not apply for variance for the eaves and get a eave that you want? Okay. Leave that, don't have. And Tom, at the edges, because there's no screening shown at the edge of the property, looks like the driveways go right to the edge. What is that treatment? How does that address the neighbor?
It's a good question. I don't really see trying to put a plant in the road that needs draining.
Fencing or anything?
But
What is the privacy condition between this and the neighbor?
Just the existing fences
There is
there.
existing
Was it
fencing, on both the east and west side is continuous fencing.
Sorry, I thought you meant down the top. Pavement runs up, get ready.
No, to the.
Oh, to the other side. No, there's a-
Common property line, so is there any screening or anything to soften the edge of this project to existing neighbors?
There's a fence along there, and they were having discussions about,
Okay,
good. Sorry, I didn't get your question.
thanks, that's it.
I have one question. Your garage doors are painted
Yes,
yellow?
very yellow.
That's my only question.
We kind of wanted to contrast with, there's a lot of grey concrete
Yeah,
in there.
no, I love it. I think
And there's also a lot of hard surfacing, so to give it a little bit of personality, to suggest that it's not just a kind of a leftover space that is joyless, that it's just for moving cars around. It's kind of to give it a little bit of personality and suggest that it's a place, it's a home for people rather than just, you know, storage.
There's lots of yellow flowers in the courtyard.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. That's all my questions.
Just with regards to the level 2 courtyard, can you just speak to the soil depths that you're looking to achieve?
That's going to be at least 12 inches. If not, well, it'll be going to go up to 18 inches. So it'll be full depth.
And then what would be the depth for the trees? The 18?
In the which?
The trees, for the trees?
Well, I can get them on the berms, and that'll be 18 inches.
It's easy.
Those are not really trees, those are Amelanche, I think, being planted for us, so they'll peak out at about 4 meters, 3 meters, 4 meters. So those are large shrubs. That's about right. That's a good dimension.
What? Those are all the questions.
I appreciate the concept studies. That's really valuable, I think. Did you guys look at flipping the U?
Yes. Yeah.
You did? Okay. That would have been my first, like...
It was planning's first comment as well.
Say that again?
It was planning's first comment as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
It does kind of create, if you can imagine the opposite shape there, it kind of creates a very tight, heavily shaded building face around here. If you were to have the building run along and then turn in an acute corner there at less than 90 degrees, as you know, I would say it would exacerbate some privacy concerns with proximity, and then it would create a lot of shading from the south and southwest to have a building pushed into a relatively tight corner this way.
So our common open space in the backyard, which we are forced to not build on, will be completely shaded for, and the property behind us will also experience significantly more shading.
Awesome.
Just
Yeah.
to, one, why the stair off at the end, why not just roll it right off the courtyard?
We would be under, because of the slope, you know, when you're calculating usable common outside space, I think we would exceed, I know what you mean.
Okay.
It's, you know, it's still an amenity if it's a space for kids to run and roll down rather than a staircase for them to walk down.
And a guardrail.
I understand.
My other question is, does this have a passive window shutter system?
It doesn't need it for overheating, as calculations
Even on the
are
west?
at the moment, even on the west. So just by calculating all the operable windows in there, and there's a considerable stack effect up through 3 stories of open stair. They were in the design on some of the larger south and southwest facing windows until recently, but it looks like we won't need them.
Yep.
Yeah. So the 8-unit count, is that a go or no go for the client? Was there flexibility in the amount of units?
They would have liked us to get 9 units in there.
Or 20?
If that answers your question.
But that was the go or no go?
Yeah. I can also tell you guys that they tested 300 passive houses and their energy use was within 3% of what they were calculated as. So this is something that really works. This is not there's no guessing here. This is, it's really awesome.
Great. Okay. Comments. I can start. My only comment would be to consider overhangs, especially increasing overhang, especially on those patios.
I'm sure we can accommodate that.
Yeah. There you go.
Quick question, just there was something that was just commented on, the stack effect. Is that like requiring the occupant to be going up and opening windows, or is there any sort of like system that actually kicks in with?
It is requiring them to do it, but it's based on only sort of 3 hours a day. It's something very modest, and it's just because these are tilt and turn inward opening windows, it's just to crack open the window at the top. It's not to go and actually open. So in the summer you could leave them like that 24 hours a day because that they're not going to create a big breeze or no security issue or anything. So yeah, we would, if we felt like we were imposing, we would have to give a manual to someone to say this is how you keep your house cool. Then we would introduce something like give them exterior shading, and we don't want this to be have a passive house plaque on it, but people to say to their neighbours it's actually like we've swapped being too cold for being too hot in the summer. So we're paying careful attention to that.
Okay. It's really exciting to see this happening here too, so that's great. I like the materials and the finishing details and what you talked about changing it up with the galvanized finish, the galvalume, with a different, like the vertical standing seam or whatever it may be, really helps to kind of subtly break up the massing a little bit. It's just, I know with Passive House, just with the actual window sizes, it's such a different state than how we were normally looking at a lot of the projects here. We're like bigger, more glazing too, and I get the principles behind it, but all these little things help. I think that increased amount of cedar in the patio areas will really help to warm up the whole building. And that element with the yellow, I think it lightens the whole project too. Makes it kind of playful and different. With those, the window boxes, before I get your explanation for it, but I almost feel like if anything, like increasing those slightly so that say that there was just, because as of right now there's sort of two shapes. There's one that's slightly more square and slightly larger. I feel like that kind of looks busy. Like it would be great aesthetically to see that it was just one of those shapes that was left that wasn't the window box, and then everything else was treated with that window box. I feel like it would look very purposeful. And if anything, it sounds like it would just increase rather than take away from the performance of the building. That's just my opinion. I'd seen things like you're talking with the mitered corners on the corrugated finish. That's really nice to see that being considered like this early on.
Yeah, we wanted to have this. Last point. We want to get this super durable material without making it too industrial. So bringing that little bit of elegance to it, we feel goes a long way, and allowing a very hard material in a residential. But we're excited to know that now the examples that we have they really do look the same years later, without wearing, with nothing growing on it. It's really nice.
That's great. And then the courtyard area. I really like the flow and the variation that's in it, without it doesn't seem to be busy, but it has enough going on in it that it really could feel like a community. There'll be a lot of like-minded people that will buy into this and will want to live into it too. So that seems to be a good way to encourage that. Comments.
So my first comment is really related to the site plan, and essentially there's no buffer between the car parking and property line to the neighbour. So my biggest concern is that so this V or U-shaped profile lends itself to giving nothing back to the street. I think part of the purpose of landscaping and having some separation from the property line is to enhance the surrounding area, and having a little buffer there for any planting, apart from the very front portion of the building, is not really giving back much to Aspel Lane. And on top of that, I'm kind of wondering, looking at the options that you went through for the site plan, was there ever a consideration for an I or a T shape, L or T shape? Don't need to answer that. It's just something I noticed. I didn't really see those options in there, and it kind of makes me think that the articulation that's being shown here as well is really more driven from the desired unit count rather than the response to the site. So I'm seeing things working to get 8 units in there, and it's creating a host of issues to neighbouring properties. And the next comment is really just related to passive houses in general, and a bit of commentary about whether going forward in Squamish and other municipalities, you can either get certified passive houses or you can get essentially a passive house consultant doesn't quite meet the standard, but you don't have to rely on the testing and certification that perform almost equally as well. And I think the advantage sometimes is that you don't get pulled through the constraints of passive house in terms of articulation, and then you can be a little bit more playful and give back a bit more architecture to the area. So I see the problem that happens is that you do get stuck with a lot of calculations that don't allow you to do too much pushing and pulling of facades. So, and I guess my final comment is I am concerned about the lack of overhangs for building in this particular climate. So I think it's concerning. So, yeah.
I would back that up. That was a comment I wanted to make too, where I think that this is a really good, very strong argument for getting a variance on the overhangs from both a functional perspective and a aesthetic perspective too.
One of the reasons why we were really sensitive towards the side overhangs was because we ended up with the driveways on the side without any space for landscaping there. So we wanted to be very cautious about what variances we do have to get and not don't have. And the other thing is that actually plays a very big role in it is that the back setback of 9 meters, and because it's so wide, actually it ate up a lot of our area where we could put the building down. Because if the front, which is 7.6 and not 9, was 7 point something instead of the 9, it would have, that extra 2 meters makes a big difference. So I appreciate your comment.
This is a really interesting project. I think it's probably the one and only type of project that I personally support seeing more density down in that area. But I think the only comment I would share with my colleagues here is that 8 units is maybe pushing a little bit more than maybe 7 on that site. Should be the right number, but you seem to have done it with this design, so I don't know. I guess you go with it. I don't know about the ends of the roads, if you could actually turn a car around in there. That doesn't look like a full hammerhead at the end. So I don't know if you've done any turn radius calculations on how somebody's going to turn around in there, and backing out is really not the ideal thing, especially when kids run in and out of garages and stuff like that. So.
The road is 6.5 meters wide, which is basically a double road, and allows me to reverse at 2.10 out. Yeah.
You think that'll fit there? And what about the sort of the wing of the building on the, is that an overhang or is that on the street level?
So it's basically there to, in case there's a car maneuvering into that car park that's more than 8 feet high, so that it doesn't, it's kind of a visual reminder that there's a projecting building overhead. So it's not actually, I don't know if it's an integral part of the structure in the design at the moment, but it's there to make sure that you drive around that line and don't sort of cut the corner into that parking space, because there is a projecting overhang that's fairly large, about 5 feet out above, which is the living room of someone's unit above there.
Yeah, that might be the make or break for turning. Somebody comes in with a truck, and there's lots of people.
We will have a big sign
trucks
up there that say no big trucks are allowed in this property.
Yeah, that's, you know, there are lots of people in town that work with their trucks, and it's their family vehicle, and it's a necessity thing, and I'd love to see everyone driving electric cars, but the reality of life is that lots of people have trucks, and they shouldn't be excluded from living in a passive house. So
we
anyway,
did make sure that the parking spaces inside are a meter longer than the district's normal parking size, just to give some people some flexibility that if you own a truck and a smaller car, even just an SUV, that you can still fit a big truck inside and then park your smaller
the
car
height
outside.
of the garage door?
Sorry?
The height of the garage door
is 7 feet.
Yeah. We need
So height's
12
not-
inches to get the concrete over top of the lintel.
Yeah, that's tight for some trucks, but anyway, that's my only comment is perhaps some thought about that turning radius there.
Well, I think it's a really interesting project. When I first cracked open the package, my reaction was, wow, it's really pushing the boundaries. And then I looked at your options and I was kind of leaning towards A versus C, and you, as I mentioned before, you convinced me that C is a pretty interesting concept. I don't think, like John, dropping a unit is going to make this work any better or less, because the problem is this project's just a little too wide for this site. And that would be my concern, of, you know, that you're treating the edges appropriately for the neighbors. So maybe it's just, you know, maybe there's some shitty old cedar fences there now, but maybe the project should be providing a new fence that's appropriate to the project. I like the V shape. It would obviously make more sense to be spun around the other way and you get solar into the courtyard, but this is the shape of the site. So at least it'd be a pretty interesting piece of architecture. The massing, I think, is quite interesting. It's bold. I like the use of materials, but as we mentioned earlier, I certainly need to look at your durability, both with drip and ground plane material. The eave is so minuscule. In fact, it's actually less on your side elevations where you don't have a setback issue. There appears to be less than on your setback sides. I would maybe encourage you to look at going eaveless, you know, more of a parapet condition. I mean, it's so small, it's not worth it. And it kind of clutters up the building more. The courtyard, I would encourage, you know, staff to allow you to let that courtyard roll off and lose the stair, and maybe on that hillside have a really playful ramp that, gee whiz, you can actually get a refrigerator into a unit on a hand truck instead of having to cart it up the stairs inside somebody's garage. So, you know, open space can be sloping. I mean, maybe it doesn't meet the definition of open space, but I think it'd be really neat. And then maybe under that big wall of landfill, you put your water storage under there and maybe get it out of the building. I don't know, it makes me a bit nervous in there. Colors, I like the punch on the garage. I almost say bring it around, throw it on the front door, throw it on a railing. You know, just I think I'd encourage you to explore a little bit more punch with colors. Maybe permeable paving or something, some interesting paving could soften its impact on the edges. But yeah, it's an interesting project. You convinced me.
Okay, my comments. I love this project. I think it's great. It would be nice if you were able to do a ramp to the backyard, because then people could visit the units, because you have a bathroom. You know, you could bump up those 2 steps quite easily, so it might be something to explore a bit more. But otherwise, I think it's fantastic. Really, cheers.
Thanks for your presentation. The package is really fantastic. I would love to live here. In terms of just getting into it, I'm okay with the shaded space in the back. I think this building provides enormous opportunity for the community, and that's okay, especially considering that you've ensured that everyone has a big patio space on the roof that's going to have a lot of sun. So I think they're going to have their private sunny space, so that's great. I also don't have any concern with the setback variance. I think it's for a very good reason, and it's so minor for such a big gain that seems okay. I echo the comments about the connection of the 2 outdoor spaces. I think the stair provided just isn't celebratory. You could really have a really great connection with these 2 spaces with a large staircase that could turn into an amphitheater. Maybe it's a playful mound, as Crosland mentioned. I think not having it accessible is really unfortunate, and I think that connection between the 2 outdoor spaces could provide a really strong, accessible connection for everyone, which is, I think it'll actually make the outdoor space even more powerful and more usable for the residents. In terms of soil depth, I don't think 18 inches is sufficient. I would encourage 3 feet for the trees to make sure that they can live a good long life. inevitably the membrane is going to fail in 30, 40 years, and at that point the trees will come out, but at that point they'll probably be past their life anyway and be ready to be replanted. But during that time they need enough soil to be successful. And then I would echo the comments too about materials, particularly at the street. I think the project could have a richer material at the street interface rather than asphalt, just to enrich in its connection to the street. And if possible, to have some permeable surfacing. I think that would be fantastic. And just a small note about community bike racks. If we had a bike rack right near the front door for visitors, or where that would be, I'm not sure. But overall, this is very exciting, and I hope it sets a tone for Squamish for sure. Well done.
I'm kind of on the same page as Dean, where I feel like I'm excited about the passive house. I think, I don't think this is quite there yet. I don't think doing a passive house negates good architecture. And I feel that there's some sustainability issues, site design, overhangs, fenestration, that could be looked at to enrich the project a little bit more instead of just doing calculations on projects. There's some really great examples in Vancouver that I would urge you to look at. Fraser Heights, the Lilac House, those are all passive houses and they're really interesting. I think this is, 2 accesses off of Aspen Road. I think it just sort of maybe flies in the face a little bit. I know your site flies in the face of sustainability. I know your site is really challenging, and I'm not sure how you would resolve it with shadowing and getting the solar orientation right. But I think it's that balance between sustainability and a passive house calculation. So.
Okay, any last comments? Okay, don't vote on this one. 'Cause it's not
I guess you can vote on this one. You voted on the last one.
Yeah, but it's not coming back if we vote now or.
Well, we can vote A or B.
Okay.
I think it's valuable, because even if in the event we don't support it, it's important.
Okay.
Yeah, that it was on the record, I guess.
Yeah, okay. So do I have a motion for any of the A, B, C, or D?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second. Any discussion on this? Do we need to clarify anything for you, Jesse? No? Okay. All in favor for B? Opposed? Motion carried. Done. Thank you.
Just to make the record. Good.
This one? Oh, yeah, I agree with you on that.
Just one, or the whole thing? Just one?
They disagree with the density on a small site.
Councillor Ted Kyer, that there was a motion passed at a recent council meeting that council would direct staff to encourage more involved drawings or 3D renderings, as well as more context to neighboring properties for developers in rezoning applications and development permits. So staff are now doing that.
Okay. Right. Okay, great.
And then we don't need to make any motion that we want to have material words included?
Not that I've been directed to ask you to do today, but I know we do.
Because he said it's in the word, yeah, but it needs, the bylaw needs to change in order for them.
I believe we're updating our development procedures application bylaw, and there's 2 or 3 bylaws in the works that need amending, as well as the advisory design panel bylaw that will happen likely following the OCP adoption. So in the works.
Because it makes a big difference to know, what grade is that grade, what is that Okay, so a motion to adjourn?
And just one question though,
Yeah.
what happened with the reimbursement forms and things for travel?
Yeah, we
Did that
lost that, didn't we?
disappear or?
They merged last time. I do on QD, but maybe just send me an email and I'll email it to you.
Okay.
You don't have any here.
We didn't get any last time either.
Yeah. Okay, I'll bump an email
But I
out.
sent a note to the entire group and then emailed about it, send it back.
Okay.
Does that work?
We can just do it next time, yeah.
Or we can do
Yeah,
it next time.
just do it next time.
Yeah, okay.
Okay? Motion to adjourn? All in favor? Let's go. Before 5,